Okay, so percent composition and mole ratio, it's the same idea as mass and things. We're looking at how much of a given element is in a compound. So there's two ways of doing that. There's the mass of the element in the compound and the fraction of things in the compound. The percent composition is the mass percent of each element of the compound. The mole ratio is of the ratio of different numbers in the compound. So percent composition and mole ratio. So what is the percent composition and the mole ratio of CO2? So the mole ratio is pretty straightforward, right? We know that there's one, let's switch to this. We know that there is 1 mole of carbon to 2 moles of oxygen. And that becomes pretty useful. We're doing conversion factors more if we know amount of carbon and we want to figure out the amount of oxygen. Another thing you could do here is look at the mole fraction. So in this case, the mole fraction of C would just be 0.33, 1/3, and the mole fraction of O would be 0.667. These are actually exact numbers because CO2 is exactly that, but writing them down, you'd have to approximate when you write it down. So that's the mole fraction, the mole ratio. What about the percent composition by mass? Well, this is relatively straightforward to go and calculate because what we can do is figure out what fraction of the total mass in this is carbon. So the first thing we need to do is figure out what the total, what the molecular mass is. So here we know that it's going to be 12, the molar mass of CO2 is 12.01 plus 2 times 16.00, and this equals 44.01 grams of CO2 per mole CO2. And so the percent carbon in one, we can say, let's take 1 mole. What's the percent carbon in 1 mole? Well, the percent carbon in 1 mole, it has 1 mole of carbon. So we have 12.01 grams of carbon in 1 mole. And 1 mole, so 1 mole, because in 1 mole of carbon dioxide, there is 1 mole of carbon. So we have 44.01 grams of CO2 in 1 mole of CO2, and that gives us 27.29% C. What's the number of significant digits? It's only limited by the number of significant digits in the molar mass of, in the mass of each, the molar mass of each element. Okay, the percent oxygen is going to be, well, how much oxygen is there in 1 mole of CO2? There's 2 moles of oxygen per mole of CO2, so it'd be 2 times 16.00 grams oxygen, and the total amount is 44.01 grams of CO2, and so that gives us 79.71% C. So if we look at a mole fraction percent, oxygen is 2/3. But if we look at a mass fraction percent, it's almost 80% of the compound because oxygen is heavier than carbon. So that gives us percent composition, mole ratio, and mole fraction.